So welcome, everybody. This is another in a series of our meetings that we're calling Curiosity Club, and it's basically topics that are communications related, though not always, but most of the time they are. And today's topic is interviewing, and it was one of the things that when we asked people for ideas about what they would like to see and experience with training, this was one that popped up several times. And so we decided to put something together on this. Just a little about myself. I'm Jim Killam. I'm with the communication team on the Wycliffe Global Alliance. So I live near Chicago, about 90 miles west of Chicago, Illinois. And I've been doing some form of journalism for about 45 years now, which makes me sound like I'm 90 years old. But I was thinking this morning that just coming up to 45 years when I started covering high school sports for my local paper. And I worked in journalism in newspapers for about 10 years after university. And then I taught journalism at Northern Illinois University for 17 years before I got into mission work. So I've now been in Wycliffe or with the Seed Company for a total of about 11 years. I was with the Seed Company prior to this role. So I probably have interviewed a couple of thousand people over those years, and some of those interviews have gone better than others. And I think it's largely a matter of confidence and a matter of just kind of realizing it's a conversation and that the person you're talking with is probably more nervous than you are sometimes, and you just are okay with being nervous together. So, and that does go away as you do more and more of these. And by the way, this is if you don't do journalism for your main occupation, this is still for you because all of us, I think, in some form or another, have a chance to interview people. A lot of times that's on video now or on a podcast or just in front of a group. For instance, if you're leading an organization and want to interview someone up front in a meeting or something, it's a good skill to have. So some of this may be a little bit journalism centric, but I think you'll find that it should be relevant regardless. So I think this is the picture a lot of people have of being interviewed. It's this intimidating experience. You know, it's almost like you've seen a police process show or something where you're under this bright light and you've got this person screaming angry questions at you. That is not what we're going for today. Um, by the way, this is an AI produced photo illustration. Most of the illustrations I'm going to use in this today I produced them with ChatGPT. So just a side note on that is that there's really some great things you can do in creating presentations just by telling ChatGPT what you're trying to make. So let's not call it conducting interviews and have a scary experience, but let's call it conducting effective interviews, and we're going to eliminate that scenario right away. Let's first look at a quote. This is a friend of mine who used to be a reporter for the New York Times. He lives near me, but I interviewed him for a book I wrote about missionary journalism 11 years ago or so now. And he said, all interviewing done well is therapeutic. It's therapeutic to talk and to share. It's therapeutic for the writer to try to understand somebody else's path. I really like that approach to interviewing where it's almost like therapy and it's almost like a session with a counselor if done well, because you're asking someone to tell you their story. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you just need a basic bit of information. But more often than not, especially in ministry, you're really trying to get someone's story and find out a lot more about them and why they do what they do or what happened in their life that brought them to this point. So you can kind of think of it as an intimate conversation rather than an interrogation. I think that can be very helpful. So here's some steps. The first is prepare. Sometimes you can be over prepared, as this person is sitting at their desk in a stormtrooper outfit. Some things you might do before you ever sit down for an interview. And by the way, when we talk about interviewing, this could be in person, it could be over Zoom, it could be with a video camera rolling. There's lots of ways that you can interview someone, sometimes even over email. which is a different topic that we'll talk about in a bit. But I'll try to specify if these tips are for one of those formats or another, but a lot of these are going to carry over for all of them. So learn as much as you can about the person first off, especially if this person has sort of an online presence and maybe has had things written about them before, has been in videos before. That's often not the case with ministry interviews. A lot of times it's people that no one has really heard of. And that's, I think, a special part of this experience is getting to tell someone's story for the first time. So learn as much as you can, learn about what they do, learn as much as you can about the topic you're going to be talking about. Write down, I do this, write at least 5 good questions beforehand. I don't always rely on those, but it just helps me to think through what I'm going to be talking about with this person and maybe the order I want to do that in. AI is your friend on this, by the way. One of the things you can do is say, I'm going to interview, you can tell your AI source, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, say, I'm going to be interviewing a person about Bible translation in PNG, let's say. Give me 20 suggested questions I might ask, and it'll give you very good starter questions. I don't just use those without changing them or revising them, but it's a really good starting point if you're not sure how to interview someone. Just ask AI to give you some tips. And usually I'll say 20 or 30 questions, because why would I ask for 5 if I can get 20 in the same amount of time, and then I've got more to choose from. So it's a good step. You do want to do all this before you request the interview with someone, particularly if it's someone who you have to contact by phone or by email to request the interview, because they may say, yes, can I do that right now? Do you have time right now? And I've had that happen where if I had not been prepared for that interview before I requested it, then I'm caught flat-footed and I'm not sure what to say. So it's a good idea to have a little bit of preparation work done before. And then know the tools you're going to use. And by that, I mean know how they work. This is the wrong time to experiment with a camera for the first time or with a recorder for the first time, because you want everything to work. You want to know the right buttons to push. You want to know on Zoom how to record a meeting, things like that. So don't fumble around with it for the first time, but practice once or twice, and then have a backup. And by that, what I mean is, if I'm recording an interview on Zoom, for instance, I'll also set a little voice recorder next to my computer and record a backup version. And that way, if anything bad happens on either one of those, I've still got the interview recorded and I don't have to make the person do it again. I messed up on this once. I was in Colombia at the Global People Conversation for the Alliance, and I went to interview someone and pushed the button on the camera thinking I was starting the camera, and I was actually stopping the camera. And so we had a whole interview that we had to redo because all I had was a picture of him starting to talk. So it can happen, and that risk never ends, no matter how many interviews you've done. Okay, these are fairly obvious, but I thought I'd cover them anyway. Make the appointment. You can use, to make the appointment, you might do email or phone call or text or social media message. I guess whatever way the most effective way to contact that person would be. It's rarer and rarer that I would make a phone call to request the interview anymore. Usually it's an email or a social media message. And if I know the person well, it might be a text, but it's just a little less intrusive to do it that way rather than a phone call. And in that appointment, and as I'm having that, let's say it's an email, I do try to set expectations for the interview. What do I want to talk about? About how long will it take? Where will we meet? And that could be a physical location, or it could be Zoom or whatever. It could be email, although I do avoid email interviews most of the time. I really like to have a conversation rather than an email exchange, because email doesn't sound like the person talking. It's usually they've taken time to think through a response, and it sounds a little more it sounds less natural. It sounds more antiseptic, so to speak. It's not the best way to conduct an interview, although sometimes it's the only way you can do it. You'll need to know if a translator will be needed, and we'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. You'll ask, is it okay if I record? Depending on the laws in your country, you have to notify someone if you are recording a conversation. And it's just a good idea for them to know beforehand about that. And is it going to be video or just audio? That's important because if it's going to be video, they want to prepare a little bit and probably dress a little differently than they would if it was just an audio conversation. So you just want to give them warning on that and give them a fair notice about how you want to proceed with this. And then how will you use this information is a fair thing to say too. Are you going to use this online? Will it be in a video that's going to be online? Is it going to go globally? Is it just for your organization? So let them know exactly how you plan to use it. That's a fair thing to do. And then the last point there, if the person is not accustomed to doing interviews, and that's most people in ministry, other than I think leaders sometimes, avoid the word interview. I think conversation sounds a lot less threatening. And so I'll just, in an email, I'll say, could we have a conversation about, and then I'll give the topic. It's a little bit more friendly sounding. So here's some tips about an in-person interview. Again, this is an AI illustration, so this is not completely correct in what I would say is the best practice, but we'll talk a little about that. So choose a quiet setting that's comfortable for them or at least neutral. So sometimes that can be in a person's office or in a person's home in a living room on a couch or something. What you don't want to do is have it in that situation where it's like at a table with a bright light over you or something where it seems like an interrogation. You just want them to be at ease and comfortable. You want to be at their eye level or a little below. Used to have this police chief that I would interview sometimes, and he was very much into the psychology of authoritarianism. And so he would sit on the corner of his desk and put me on this little chair where I was like 3 feet below him, and he wanted to just like dominate the conversation. And so I always just smiled because I knew what he was doing. But that's a way to kind of establish authority, and you don't want to do that. You want the person to feel at ease with you. So eye level a little bit below is good. What I would say is wrong about this picture is the interviewer is way too close. If you can smell what the person had for lunch on their breath, that's way too close. You should be, 3, 4 feet apart usually. And just again, it can depend on how comfortable you are with the person and how well you know them. Be aware of your body language. We'll talk about that in terms of things like eye contact and arm motions and things. Just make sure that you are not intimidating the person or making them uncomfortable. And then where to place the recorder if you're recording the conversation. Where she has it here is not great because it's immediately in view of the person all the time. I'll usually set it off to the side where it's not between myself and the person for eye contact. And then when I'm trying to make eye contact during the interview, they're not always remembering, oh, the recorder's running, I'm being recorded. They just forget it's there. I'll just off to the side enough so it would be out of this picture or out of the video picture if you're shooting video, but close enough, obviously, where you pick up what they're saying. If the person seems nervous or uncomfortable, start with friendly small talk and get them comfortable talking before you're taking notes or recording. But as I say here, don't overdo this. If the person is pressed for time, you don't want to talk about the weather for 20 minutes. You want to just basically make that 30 seconds or so and just get the person feeling like they're comfortable and talking, but you want to respect their time as well. It is a good way to help warm up a conversation if the person seems nervous, though. Okay, Zoom interviews. I would guess most of us have had a scenario that looks something like this, right? Where you wear a nice shirt or jacket on top, and then you have shorts or slippers on the bottom. It's not a great idea. For one, it just doesn't feel professional as you are conducting the interview. So the way you dress in an interview can make a difference. So you want to dress appropriately. You want to have a clean background, which just means not a lot of junk behind you. You don't want to have plants growing out of your head in the picture. Again, we're talking about something you'd be recording on Zoom. But even if it's just a conversation you're not recording for video, it can be distracting to have a lot of background stuff. Check the mic. Make sure that your sound is working well. No ambient noise on either end. So if the person, let's say, is outdoors, you might be hearing traffic, you might be hearing birds, something like that. You'd want them to get to a spot where that's not an issue. Birds in particular can really mess up an interview because of the frequency that they are, or insects too. Like if you have locusts, that's one of the things that really can dominate an audio interview. Lighting check, just be sure that their face is well lit. And if not, ask them to move. Sometimes if they can be near a window with the light coming from the side like that, that's a nice way to do a lighting check. And then if the internet is bad, you're going to want to have a backup plan and probably decide whether this is worth doing video or whether you just want to kind of cut it apart and make it a text interview or something. So like all of this, don't be afraid to ask them to change something if something's not quite working. And then if you use a screen background for Zoom, here's an example of me with a dumpster fire, which is sort of fun, but again, you want to present a little more professional appearance with something like this. So I typically just use my office background and I don't use screen backgrounds, but if you do use a screen background, keep it pretty simple. Okay, your demeanor during an interview. Again, I mentioned before, this is a conversation, not an interrogation. So relax and be yourself, smile, make eye contact, but don't overdo it. By that, I mean, don't just stare at them nonstop through the whole interview. That's strange and a little bit intimidating. And just think of it as, again, a conversation with a friend, because that's generally what it is. Don't read your questions to them. That's a really big issue with people who aren't used to interviewing people, is you look down at a list and you read the question. That brings a formality to it that you don't really want, because they're going to feel like they're being tested. It's just a much better idea to have those questions there if you need them, but then paraphrase, use your own wording, and make it just a conversational question as you're making eye contact. It's really a bad idea to look down at your list and read while you're trying to establish comfort with the person. So listen intently, ask good follow-ups. Don't just move on to your next scripted question. So again, this is not like a test or a quiz you're giving them, but this is a conversation. So in any conversation, you're going to ask follow-up questions. And use silence. Sometimes silence is really valuable because the person you're talking with is going to want to fill that silence. It can be a little uncomfortable, but if you're trying to get someone to say a little more, sometimes just being quiet will accomplish that. Some audio and video demeanor issues. Avoid uhs and ums. I'm terrible with this, by the way. So when I do a video interview, I'll have to go back through and cut the ums and uhs out of it. And I do that for sometimes the people that I'm interviewing as well. But be aware of your speech habits and try to clean that up. Don't interrupt them. By that, there's another point. Don't finish their sentence if they're struggling for a word. On video, you want that person's voice to be the only one you hear a lot of the time. So if you're interrupting a thought with a question or something, then it's going to be very hard to edit that down to just that person. So you want to just leave space around their statements so that it's easy to edit and so that it's clearly them speaking. And again, a lot of times with a video interview, you, the interviewer, are not going to be heard. It's going to be just the person you're speaking with. So keep your own voice out of it and leave a gap of a second or two before and after they speak. If there's background noise, you can ask them to repeat a key statement too. Be aware. This will happen like if a car goes by or a motorcycle goes by in the middle of your conversation, and it's going to be very distracting. You can just say, could you say that again? I wanted to be sure we get that right because there was some background noise. This is all kind of you working with the person you're interviewing, trying to help them tell a really good story. So the idea being you're working as a team, you're not working at odds with each other, but you're working together to produce a good story. Okay, some things about just some basics. If you haven't done this in advance, you need to ask the person you're interviewing to spell their first and last names and to give you their title, if that's applicable for what you're doing. Let them spell their name aloud to you or have them write it for you and get the correct spelling of other names mentioned. These are just basics where you can do a really good job on a story and spell the person's name wrong, and it just destroys the credibility of the whole thing. And the person is going to not trust you as much with information if they, in the future, if they know you didn't even spell their name right. So it's the kind of thing you want to get right. I mentioned interpreters before. A lot of our work ends up being interviews with people who don't speak the same language we do. So here are some things you might do in those cases. Furnish some of your questions in advance to the interpreter if that's practical, so they can be a little bit familiar with what you're going to be asking. It doesn't mean you have to stick with that list, but it just helps the interpreter feel a little bit more comfortable. Make eye contact with the person you are interviewing, not just the interpreter. I've seen that happen before, and I think as you get more experienced with this, it becomes more natural where you're talking with a person and that interpreter is off to the side a little bit. But you want to not make it look like it's you and the interpreter against the person you're interviewing. Be sure the interpreter knows when you're looking for quotes and not just general paraphrases. Now, this may not be the entire interview, but they need to be aware that if you're particularly writing something where you need quotes, because a lot of times interpreters will paraphrase and they'll shorten a long statement down to something very minimal. And that's not what you're looking for with an interview for a story. So again, it's just making sure that they know what you're looking for. And sometimes paraphrasing is just fine. So be sure that they know what the situation is. Develop a rhythm in asking questions. Keep phrases short and break them into several parts if necessary, and let the interpreter catch up. And that's just good practice, even with speaking through an interpreter or having a conversation. You don't want to put too much into one statement before you let the interpreter catch up. So you'll get a feel for that as you do more and more of this. Let's talk about asking good questions. Here's another quote from my friend Dirk. I always ask people where they grew up. What did their family do for work? Just as a starting point, I find that yields such rich material. In almost every case, you can establish common ground with people that you talk to, shared values. Remember when I talked about small talk at the beginning of an interview? If you're not sure how to start, this is a good one. Where did they grow up? What did their family do for work? What was life like for you growing up? And that may be part of the story you're trying to tell too, but it's the kind of thing that, again, you can kind of establish rapport with someone by these sorts of friendly questions. Okay, here's some other tips on asking good questions. Open-ended questions, questions that can't be answered with yes or no. So I would not ask, is it rewarding for you to serve in this ministry? Because the person would say, yeah, it's great, or something like that. And you don't really get much from that in terms of a quote or a response or a video piece, soundbite. But I would say, what does it mean for you to serve here? Or something along those lines where they can't answer it with a single syllable of yes or no. Another way to do it is, what do you wish more people understood about this ministry, about Bible translation, about sign language translation, whatever it might be? But that's a nice question that gets people thinking and gets a thoughtful answer. How and why questions make good follow-ups. So if they say something like, yeah, I really like serving in this ministry, you say, well, can you give me an example of that? Tell me a time that made you realize how much you like doing this or how much you feel like you're following God's calling to be doing this. Can you talk a little more about blank? That's just an open-ended question and sort of a how and why to say, give me more about that, but I'm not going to just say or ask a question that's going to require a yes or no again. Can you take me through that day? That's if they're telling you a story about an experience. Let's say that there was a hurricane or a typhoon and say, what was it like? Tell me, what was that day like for you? And then get them talking. What you're doing there is asking them to tell you a story. Instead of a response to a question, suddenly they're telling you a story. And that's what you really want, that you want them to get comfortable enough with you to tell a story. In what way is just a good question if you want to go from abstract to specific. So someone will say, yeah, I really like football. It's taught me a lot about life. Well, and then you could say in what way? And then you're asking them to go deeper a little bit and to give you an explanation. So that those three words are kind of magic in an interview. In what way? Well, I mentioned we're trying to get people to tell you a story, so you're digging a little bit for stories. Let me first give you a quick definition or description of most good stories, and it's this: a sympathetic character wants something and must overcome obstacles to get it. Now, understanding that helps us to ask good questions because we are looking for stories. We are looking for these patterns. Again, this is most stories follow this. And so your sympathetic character is the person you're interviewing. What do they want? And what are the obstacles they have to overcome to get it? Or what did they have to overcome? And if you can get along that path with your questioning, you will hear good stories. So here are some questions you can ask. This a little bit like the last slide I was showing you. What happened moment by moment? Tell me about a time when, whatever the situation is, but you're asking for a story again. Can you tell me a story about someone whose life was changed because of this ministry? That's a really good one for a ministry interview. What has surprised you about this work? Or how have you seen God work in ways you didn't expect? Remember we said how and why questions? That's a how question. How has God surprised you? What's the biggest challenge you have faced in this work? Remember, that's going back to that slide, overcoming obstacles to get what they want. What's the biggest challenge you faced? It may be living in an unfamiliar culture, something like that. And then you could ask more about that. How has your ministry grown or changed since you began? What do you know today that you wish you had known when you were younger? That's one I use a lot, by the way. I think it's a really effective question to get them thinking about what's changed in them during the time that they've worked in this ministry or in this work. And what do you wish you had known years ago? What would have made a difference to have known when you were younger? What dreams or goals do you have? And then years from now, as you look back, what would make you say it was all worth it? So those kinds of questions, I think, work in lots of interview situations, and they're just kind of all-purpose questions designed to get really interesting answers from people. We're also looking for details, and that can be to help tell a story and to give you some details that just add reality and life to a story. What time did the storm wake you? What were your first thoughts? What did you make sure you had with you? Questions like that can be helpful to get a person back into the moment that you're trying to find out about. Describe that person to me. What details stand out? So if you're talking about someone that maybe had an influence on their life or something, tell me about them a little bit. What do you remember? If you close your eyes and think about your trip, what image comes to mind? That one I actually used when I was with the seed company. One of our writers went to the Philippines for a story about a Bible translation project. And she was kind of grappling with how to open a series of stories. And I just said, close your eyes and tell me what you're remembering about your trip. What's the first image that comes to your mind? And she said, challah. It's this dessert in the Philippines. It's a real colorful dessert that's served in a tall glass, and it's like purple and yellow and white. And to her, that sort of defined the cultural richness of the Philippines and the diversity in the Philippines. And so we ended up using that image in an introductory story. So sometimes that kind of a thing can just your brain can take you places you didn't know you could. Again, details, what kind of a dog was it? What was its name? Those sorts of things. What kind of a car? What kind of a bicycle were you riding? Things like that that would just add a detail that you may or may not use, but it's nice to have. Let me show you the results of one great interview. And we'll talk a little bit about this after I read it as well. But this is out of Acts 6, verses 6 through 19. And it's the story of Peter being released or broken out of jail basically by an angel. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. Quick, get up, he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals. And Peter did so. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me, the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, Peter's at the door. You're out of your mind, they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, it must be his angel. But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this, he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning, there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Okay, so that's that passage, a familiar story. I'd like for us to look back at that passage and think about how Luke, the writer, got this story. Remember that at this point in Acts, he's not traveling with Paul or Peter or anybody that we know of. He's not present during this scene. And so he would have had to interview Peter to find all these details. So if you look at the details that I've highlighted here, these are things that he would have had to ask about. And again, the results of a great interview are you can put a great story together because you have all these revealing details. So Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains, not three chains, two chains, just very specific details. Sentries stood guard. Then a light shone, and the angel struck Peter where? On the side. How would Luke have known this? He asked him, where did the angel strike you? The chains fell off Peter's wrists, and then the angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals. And that's a quote, which means he would have asked Peter, tell me exactly what the angel said to you at that point. And so that's where they get that. And then farther down, they pass the first and second guards. They come to an iron gate. Again, not a wooden gate, an iron gate. That's one of those little details that a good reporter digs out by just asking. It opened for them by itself. and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Again, not two streets, not three streets, but he asked, how far did you walk before the angel left you? Well, one street. So that's how that detail gets there. And then as Peter's coming to the house to let them know he's free, he knocked at the outer entrance. A servant named Rhoda came to answer. Now, how do we know the servant's name? Luke asked him, right? It's just like I was saying, get the dog's name. What was the name of the servant? It's the only time she ever appears. She's not a major character, but it's just one of those little details that helps the story come alive. And you just have to ask for those things sometimes. And she ran back without opening the door. I'm sure he would have talked about that too. Just kind of this funny little moment that wouldn't have had to be in the story, but the story's so much richer when it is. And then again, the quote, "You're out of your mind," they told her. It must be his angel. And so Luke is asking Peter, well, what did they say? What did they say to Rhoda at that point? So that's sort of a third-hand quote, but well known among that group. And then look at the last paragraph of that section I read. Well, first, Peter motioned with his hand, the yellow part I've highlighted there, so to be quiet. So not just saying Peter said be quiet, but motioned with his hand. So again, you get a visual of exactly what that looked like, what was happening. The last paragraph where I have some blue highlights, suddenly the details are a lot less, aren't they? There was no small commotion. Herod had a thorough search. He cross-examined the guards and, oh, by the way, ordered that they be executed. Suddenly we've gone to way less detail. And the reason for that less detail, if you think about this as a journalist, is that Peter wasn't there for this. And so as Luke was interviewing Peter for details, he didn't have details on this. And so you find that there's a much quicker explanation and a quicker description of what happened because they didn't have the exact details. So I just find it interesting how the tone and the storytelling changes there when they don't have a firsthand account. So that story and many, you can do this with many stories in scripture, particularly Luke's gospel and the book of Acts. I find Luke to be a wonderful journalist in the questions that he would ask, and he got stories that no other gospel writer got, largely by being a good interviewer. So the application for us can be, what do eyewitness stories and details accomplish? One is credibility. When you have a lot of details in a story that you have asked the person about, suddenly that story does come alive and you know that it really happened because you wouldn't have this level of detail that people could remember if it wasn't true. Now, of course, you could make a story like that up, but when there's eyewitnesses that would corroborate that story, then that's even better because you would know, oh, this really did happen this way. Specificity is another one, just these specific details that help build that story in your mind. When you think about OBT, oral Bible translation, and telling a story well verbally, those specific details help build a picture in someone's mind. And so the better you can do at collecting those on the front end as you're interviewing people, the better you can tell a story. And then bottom line with these and with the stories that a lot of us are telling as well is just we want people to believe. We want people to believe that this happened, and we want to bring glory to God through the stories we're telling. We're stewards of God's stories in the world today, and if we tell them well and accurately and with lots of detail, that glorifies God. And I can think of no better motivation to do this well than to do that. Okay, we're getting down towards the end here. So back to our own interviewing experiences. We want to finish well. We want to stay aware of time and keep your promise about how much time this is going to take. So if you told someone 20 minutes, don't let it go an hour. Keep it to 20 minutes. As you finish, ask if there's anything you should have asked but did not. I almost always do this in interviews, and sometimes they say, no, I think we covered everything, but sometimes a key detail will come out that you totally missed. And by asking that question, you might get something really important that you need to know. And then just some basic questions again that you can always ask. Can I check back with you if I forgot anything? Just a little bit of psychology with that one. Don't say, hey, if you left anything out, can I come back and ask? Because then you're making that person feel like they didn't tell a good story. But if I forgot something, if I forgot to ask you something, can I come back and ask you? It's again a way to not make them feel defensive. And then what's the best way to send this to you when it's done? You want to share the work that you're doing with the person that helped you create that story. So if you can get them a copy of a story or a video or a podcast or whatever it may be, make sure that you're able to do that. And then after it's over, and this could be a whole session on its own about how to put a story together. But I always used to tell my journalism students, first thing before you even look back at your notes, write a short story or a short outline of the story you want to tell. The story is really not in your notes and it's not on the recording, but it's in your brain. And you want to kind of first try to structure the story the way that your brain remembers it and tells it. And then you go back and check your notes in the recording. And to transcribe interviews, this used to be the worst part of this process, and AI has made it much, much easier. So there are several ways in AI you can transcribe interviews. I tend to use Notebook LM to do that, which is a Google product, but you can use ChatGPT, you can use other things. You do need to check it carefully because it's not going to be perfect. So transcribing an interview is much less of a challenge than it used to be. Okay, we are down to the end, so I would love to hear your questions and comments and ideas. There's my email. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Some of what I have learned about interviewing over 45 years, and I hope that that may have sparked some interest or some ideas for you. But any questions, comments, ideas that might have occurred to you during this?
I just want to reiterate, because you've told me this before, Jim, that one about asking at the end, is there anything I've missed? Because sometimes you get a really good quote from someone like, is there anything else you would like to comment on or say, or however you word that? Yeah.
Yeah, that can work in a live setting too. Like if you're interviewing someone on a stage or something, you can just say, "What didn't we talk about that you'd really like everybody to know?" And if there's nothing, then it's still a okay way to end. But sometimes you'll get something really good.
I have one more thing to share. It's a technical topic, like when you record audio and you want to do a podcast. I found this website. It's Austrian guys who are audio engineers, and they have this algorithm. You can upload an audio file, and it cleans out any noise that's there. Even I even had an experience where I had a construction site when doing an interview, and it perfectly removed the background noise. So if you have troubles
Wow.
with recording that you cannot redo, I can highly recommend it. It's a paid service, but I think it's a very fair price, like 10 hours for 22 bucks. So you might want to check it out. And it's Austrian guys. So.
What, what, what is it called, Seraphin?
It's called auphonic.com. And even
Great.
if the audio quality is good already, like you always have some level of background noise. And it just really cleans it out very well.
Wow. Thank you. We have one here that we're experimenting with called Riverside, but it's the same kind of a service where it kind of acts as your soundboard.
Right.
So you really don't need any special equipment that acts as your sound processing and stuff. But yeah, that's great to know. I think we're seeing more and more
Yeah.
services like that. But yeah, like I mentioned, you said construction behind you. I did an interview one time with locusts behind me, and all you could hear was the locusts.
Mm.
And that might have cleaned it up. It wasn't available at the time, but there's so many new products that are here to help us, and yeah, lots of things we can take advantage of to do this better.
Do those have a free trial period, or do you just have to subscribe?
They usually have a free trial. They used to have 3 hours per month, but now they have an audio watermark in it, so you cannot use it anymore. But you can still try if it works out before you buy.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's true of a lot of some of the video tools too, is you can try them, but it's got their watermark all over it, so you really couldn't publish it. But if you just want to see if it's going to work for you, it's good to try it out. But yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Seraphin.